Happy New Year, everybody. This episode of the HoneyDew is brought to you by Liquid IV, Ritual, and RAYCON. More on that later. Let's get into the dew.
The HoneyDew with Ryan Sickler.
Welcome back to the HoneyDew, y'all. We're over here doing it in the Night Pants Studios. I am Ryan Sickler. Ryan Sickler on all social media, ryansickler.com. I want to thank you again. We're into that next 100 plus episodes, and you guys you're just awesome. Thank you so much for the support and all the love. It's felt really good. Please make sure you don't just watch on YouTube. You subscribe on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button right there. Set reminders so you know that you get video every Tuesday. You got the audio coming out on Monday, video on Tuesday. Make sure you subscribe to that. Make sure you subscribe to the Patreon show. If you or someone you know has that story you know needs to be heard, please submit at honeydewpodcast@gmail.com. We're going through tons of emails now, getting you guys on. We have heard some fantastic stories. So please subscribe to that as well. It's $5 a month, and I do know that $60 a year is a lot of money for some people right now. I know we're on unemployment out there. A lot of shit's going on. But if you can afford it and you're in for the long haul, you can save money by signing up for a year. You'll get over a month of free episodes. All right? Social media, the Facebook fan page. Go follow me there. The honeydewpodcast.com is the website. You can get the merch from my website or the HoneyDew. We've got the night pants, the night shorts, the Night Pants Nation sweats, the coffee mugs, the hoodies, the tees. It's all there. It's great stuff, quality merch. And as always, you know, I record here at the Santa Monica Music Center. So if you live here in LA, you need musical instruments, or you want lessons for your kids, this is the spot. You'll get online classes from local Los Angeles musicians. And you don't need to live here. You can live around the world. Maybe you want to take some music lessons. Maybe your kids do right now. We're on this weird fucking hiatus. Maybe you take a lesson with the kids. All right? Go to santamonicamusic.com. Use the code HoneyDew. They'll waive the registration fee. They'll give you one free lesson when you sign up for a package. All right? That is the biz. Now, you know what we do over here? We highlight the lowlights. I always say these are the stories behind the storytellers. And it's my pleasure to bring this guy on. First time here on the HoneyDew with me, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Maz Jobrani, everybody.
What's up, Ryan? How are you, man?
It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you. You said Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Where you're from? Where?
Maryland.
Maryland. Is that how they talk over there?
That's how they, way worse than that.
All right.
That's a little sample of how bad they talk.
All right. Tuesday. I like that. Tuesday.
Please, I'm excited to talk to you, but before we do, plug, promote, everything you'd like.
Yeah, well, I got my podcast. It's called Back to School with Maz Jobrani. Like you said, it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, wherever people get their podcasts. Back to School with Maz Jobrani. We bring in people that are experts in different fields. We learn from them, and we try to make it fun. I've had a lot of political people on recently. I just had Willie D from the Ghetto Boys on.
Really?
That was cool.
Man, I love the Ghetto Boys.
Oh, they're great, man.
Sure. How'd you get that?
Well, that's an interesting story. This week Halloween fell on a this year Halloween fell on a weekend. Me and Get to Boy went trick or treating.
Yeah.
So I had heard their music. I knew of them, and if you've ever played the Houston Improv, Willie D's from Houston.
Yes, yeah.
So I had done the show one night, and they said Willie D is in the green room after the show, wants to say hi, and I said all right. So I go back there, and there he is sitting, and it's weird because the career that you and I have chosen, we run into people that we've seen, right? Like if you've chosen to be an accountant, it's not like you've seen some famous accountant and then one day down the line you're gonna meet that, right?
Hey, try that! Here he is, man. That guy's great with numbers.
He does taxes so good. He finishes that shit on April 14th. That dude is the shit, man. No, so there was none of that. And meaning there was no expectation to meet this person. But you see these people, you go, oh, there's Ice Cube. Oh, there's Willie D. Oh, there's Sean Penn. Oh, I'm thinking all the people that there's Michelle Obama. I've met all these people in my life.
Wow, yeah.
Just from doing what we do. And so, yeah, I come backstage and he's sitting there and we just start talking, get to talking, and he's like, you know, he's politically speaking, we're on the same wavelength, and so we hit it off. And then so every time I go to Houston, he'll come check out the show. He actually wanted me to He had some a big like I think it was I forget which it was some anniversary. He was doing a roast. He wanted me to go down there and roast him. I was supposed to go. That was like stressful because I'm not a big roaster. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I got to come up with some stuff. And I was like, all right, Willie, you're getting older. Like instead of Willie D, they're gonna call you Willie AARP or something like that.
Yeah.
This stupid shit like that. But it's funny because it's not funny, but unfortunately I had to cancel because that's when, not this year, but the year before. It was just last year. There was fires in like Malibu, and my son had football, and his game got canceled. So then I had to stay here to watch his game later. And just looking back on it, I go, God, those seem like simpler times because I was canceling because of fire. Now I can't even be in a room. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So that's how I met him, and so he came on and told some good stories.
Yeah. What? So back to school. So you're getting knowledge, or you get what else? So
I've had kind of like when you have people come tell their stories, you realize there's so many interesting people with interesting stories. So I had a guy who helped land the Mars rover on Mars. He worked for he worked for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, which was partnered with NASA. And this dude is an Iranian American guy. His name's Firuz Naderi. He came and told the story. He goes, we'd been trying to land on Mars forever, and then he goes, we worked on whenever we get into the atmosphere in Mars, the thing would blow up. So once they got the Mars rover, he goes, it went. He goes, we worked on it for 4 years. This thing goes all the way up to Mars. And he goes, the problem is, once these things get into the atmosphere in Mars, he goes, it takes 8 minutes for the signal to come back to Earth.
Okay.
So he goes, we knew it had gotten to Mars, but we didn't know if it had landed. So we get, so it's there. Now we got to wait 8 minutes to see if it's landed. And he goes, 8 minutes go by, and then whoever the mission control goes, rover has landed. And he goes, I started crying.
Oh, dude, I just got chills.
Yeah. I get chills too. He goes, 4 years. We all just started crying. I'm like, holy moly.
That's a college eternity right
dude,
there.
So there's a guy like that. Then there's a lady I brought on who I'd listened to. She was, I forget her name right now, but she had been on Terry Gross, All Things, not All Things. She does Fresh Air, which is an NPR interview show. She's great. This lady is a cave diver. Like she goes underneath, she goes into caves.
Nah, I'm already having anxiety about thinking. I've gone spelunking before, and I wouldn't do that with water in it. Fuck that,
Forget it.
Like swims under and finds the pockets and all that.
Finds the pockets. She's the one who they'll do ropes as they go down so they know how to come back, and then it gets dirty and murky underneath.
She's the one leading that, like taking the rope down. Fuck that.
Yeah, and she was telling the story in her book. Her book's amazing. Her book talks about like at one point she and a few other world-class divers are underneath some glacier or some shit, and all of a sudden it starts cracking and it breaks, and now there's current going, and it's like pulling them, and they're trying to use the rope to go back. And she's like, the whole time I'm thinking to myself, if we get stuck here, someone's got to come save us. She goes, wait a minute, I realize the best of the best are like, we're here.
Yeah.
Who's gonna come save us? I mean, how crazy is that shit, right? So you hear these stories.
That sounds great.
Part of it has been inspirational, to have these people on. I had a few people on that ran for Congress and for city council. It's all about that. So the whole idea of back to school with Maz Jobrani came about because my kids now are 12 and 9.
Okay.
And a few years ago when they were a little younger, how old's your kid?
6.
6. So you know how it is. You probably get this all the time. Hey, why is the sky blue? Hey, why is this? How does this work?
Because they think you know everything.
They think you know everything.
They do.
And I'm watching this. I'm like, shit. I would have to be Neil deGrasse Tyson to have the answers for everything.
Yeah.
And then I say, you know what? I'll start bringing back experts. And the way we always bring in experts on my show, and the way our shows always start is I have my kids on video ask a question, and we edit that in. So,
cool.
Yeah, so I had a guy, for example, this was actually interesting. There's a guy named Frank Figluzzi. This guy's like the real deal. He's always on MSNBC as an analyst. He's the former assistant director of the FBI for counterintelligence. So this dude was all about, like, he knew what was going on. Like, he's the guy, they're the guys who would like look into like terrorism stuff happening and all that, like what's going on,
Like, don't leave your house on Thursday. What?
Yeah.
Can't say anything other than that.
Yeah.
Don't leave your house on Thursday.
Exactly. So what I do is I tell my son, I'll be like, Dara, his name's Dara. I go, Dara, the guy coming on is a former FBI guy. I go, what's your question for him? He's 12 years old. So he goes, okay, I'm going to ask him if he's ever shot anybody. I go, that's probably the right question for a 12-year-old to ask.
Yeah.
So I ask him, and Frank actually has a great answer. He's like, the truth is, in all my career, I didn't have to, because he goes, as FBI, employees. He goes, we get the highest kind of training to de-escalate those things. And that leads into a quick conversation about this whole, like, is it defund the police, or is it reimagine the police? He goes, this is reimagine the police.
Re-educate.
And he goes, if we could spend the resources that I got to train me to de-escalate, if all our police force had that, then when, you know, some homeless guy's coming at the cop, he's not going to shoot him. He's going to know how to de-escalate that.
Right.
So it leads to really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, that's been the podcast. Been doing it for a little over a year now with ATC. And you and I were just talking about, you know, trying to grow it. So yeah, I've been doing the podcast.
Subscribe to Maz's podcast.
Subscribe. You go to. I have my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Maz Jobrani.
What's your social media?
My
and all
social.
that?
It's all across the board is at Maz Jobrani.
Okay.
And on that too, you know how it is, man. When this pandemic hit, as comedians, I was so busy traveling the country and the world doing shows.
Yeah, you travel the world. That's right. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, people are like, "Oh no, you need to have an online game." And I mean, I had online people, but all of a sudden I go, wait a minute, I thought online was to promote the live.
Can we just for a second, going back to when we started way back whenever.
Yeah.
It was just getting up and telling jokes. All I had to do was write jokes, get up and tell them. Then it became websites and learning WordPress. And then all of a sudden the MySpaces and the Facebooks and the Instagram. And you don't even see actors having to do this. Like, for us as comedians, it has been, you better keep up with that shit. And then podcasting. And then podcasting used to be audio. We'd all be sitting in each other's living room or whatever. Now they're fucking TV shows.
It's crazy, dude.
Make sure you subscribe.
Make sure you subscribe. It is crazy because of what you just said. It's like keeping up with the next thing. We all remember when Dane Cook hit it big with his MySpace page. And I remember him telling me, it was kind of funny because he's like, I get a lot of shit, but what did he say? He said something like, he goes, but like sometimes when they give me shit, I'm like, hey man, I got over 1 million people like me or love me or whatever it is. And he goes, I can actually literally say that because he had over 1 million people, and every comedian was like, how'd you do it? Well, then MySpace goes away, and then Facebook comes on, and then Facebook goes away, and then Instagram. As you said, it's like constant. Now that TikTok, I haven't even gotten it.
I know.
I got an account, but I didn't do nothing. I didn't do anything with it.
No.
Because I'm like, I don't know. But in the meantime, the one thing that I've learned a little bit in this pandemic is, I used to think, okay, Instagram was like, okay, put your 3-minute video so people will go watch the full video. But somebody was telling me, they're like, no, Instagram's its own thing now. So you got to put the video you got on Instagram is the video that you need to have on Instagram. Don't mess with having people go, oh, now go and put this URL and go over here. Of course, you put it in there, but people want to be. And then I was like, you know what? That's kind of how I do it too. Like if I get videos, I just watch, and then I stop.
Yeah.
So it is. It's constantly learning, constantly switching. You and I were just talking about this whole like, then there's Patreon, then there's this, then there's that. And I'm like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
I know, it's a lot of shit. So, look, I want to get into this because I want to know more about you and your background. I know we're going to talk about your grandfather.
Yes.
But grandfathers always start down the line.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about your family, and then, you know, your upbringing. Let's get into your grandfather real quick. Is this your dad's dad or mom's dad?
My mom's dad. My mom's dad. So first of all, before I go any further too, also if people want to like get an idea of my comedy stuff, I do have the Netflix special called Immigrant, so they can check that out. And I talk a lot about being an immigrant because I was an immigrant. So this is a great lead into what I am. I am an immigrant. So born in Iran in 1972. And 78 protests start in the streets of Iran against the Shah of Iran. He was the king, basically. And up until then, a lot of people there'd been protests, there'd been unrest, and the Shah, being a dictator at the time, now, you know, granted, you could call him like a benevolent dictator as well, because he modernized the country in many ways. So he brought a lot of good to the country, but at the same time, he had a secret police that would disappear people. So it's kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
depending on what side you're on, right?
He's a good guy if you're good. He's good to you.
And by the way, the government that comes after him, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran, they take away all that modernization and they pull people back, and they disappear a lot more people. So they're even more atrocious. But let's get back to the Shah. So the Shah had been good at quashing these types of uprisings. So I think in the late 70s, a lot of people didn't think that a revolution was going to happen. So my father's on business in America. in New York, and he tells my mom, hey, why don't you bring, so at the time it's me, my older sister Miriam, and my baby brother Kashi at the time. And my
And
mom,
you're how old at this point?
at that point I'm 6 years old.
Okay.
78. Late 78. My dad says, hey, listen, it's a winter break, 2-week winter break. Why don't you bring me and my older sister, come to New York, stay with me for a couple weeks, and then you guys can go back. And by then, hopefully the protests will have calmed down. And I always say this is a common story for a lot of Iranians. You know, we come here and the protests get more and more and more. So I always say we packed for 2 weeks and we stayed for 40-something years. We never, we never went back.
Right.
We never went back. And
let me ask you this real quick, 'cause this is my own ignorance.
Yeah.
Outside of coming to the U.S., where's another popular destination people would flee from Iran and go? Where else?
That's a great question. So I think because now you got to realize Iran, similar to countries like, let's say, India or countries like, I'm trying to think other countries where there's places like, I'm not sure Pakistan will fall into it. Basically, a lot of these countries have had Western influence, right? So India obviously had the British running it for a long time,
right.
you know. Or this is a good idea, you know, a lot like Algeria and those places had the French, right? So Iran at some point it had some French influence, but for the most part through the 1900s, like starting from the in 1953, just to go back for a second, Iran had a guy who was democratically elected. His name was Mossadegh. This guy was the parliamentary leader who was elected as that. The Shah, who later ends up in the revolution in the late 70s, he was the king, but the people had elected this guy. So it was parliament, and then there was the king. Now, the West, England and the U.S., wanted the Shah in power because the Shah would let the U.S. and England have oil interests.
I see.
This guy, Mossadegh, when he took over, he tells the British, he goes, hey, British Petroleum, you've been taking our oil for all these years. We're going to nationalize our oil and take our oil back. So the Brits go to the Americans and they go, hey, if this guy is able to do that, then Iran will go to the Russians and it'll become communist. So they play the communist card in the 50s, and Eisenhower says, all right, let's do this. And there's a guy named Kermit Roosevelt, who was like the grandson of one of the Roosevelt, like Teddy Roosevelt or something. He helps lead the CIA coup that overthrows the democratically elected leader. And as a matter of fact, years later, I think Bill Clinton apologized for it, because for the longest time, America was like, oh, we didn't do it. But it's one of the only, I mean, we live in a time of conspiracy. It's one of the only coups that went the way they planned it to go. Because the fact is, when you try to do a lot of this stuff, human emotions and errors get involved, and it doesn't go the way you want it to go. This went the way they wanted to go. They brought CIA operatives into the streets of Iran who were saying, this guy is a communist, and then they overthrow that guy, and then the Shah is in place from 53 to 78, basically. Those 20-something years, Shah is allowing the West to have its oil, and he's taking that oil money and buying weapons from America. So it's like win-win for the weapons and oil industry. So all of that to say, your question was, I got
what other countries would people? Other than the
so
US?
all that to say, so Iranians would go. Some went to England, like London. Some went to Paris.
Okay.
Now you got to realize, the people who fled in the late 70s were the ones who had the money to do it. So they were successful under the Shah. And when this Islamic Republic comes in, they go full on like Stalin, executions. So they go, oh, if you were part of the Shah's government, we're hanging you. So they started hanging people. And this is, again, late 70s, right? 79. Ayatollah Khomeini comes in.
Right.
And they go, like, it goes full on cult of personality. Women's rights get there's a female.
So wait, women had more rights under the
Shah.
Really?
Women, yeah. So under the Shah, even though there was political, like he did not allow political dissent, like in a democratic country where you could go, oh, hey, this president sucks. Well, if you wrote an op-ed piece, the Shah sucks, someone would knock on your door and be like, come talk to us, right? And so there was a lot of that going on. But that said, he'd also westernized and modernized the country. So there's videos and pictures of Iran in the 70s Women got their mini skirts on, they're dancing, they're going to discotheques. There's all kinds of stuff happening. There's Iranians are very proud people. So there's like old videos of when Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton went to visit Iran, that kind of stuff. So there's a human rights activist. Her name is Shirin Ebadi, who won a Nobel Peace Prize years ago. She's this tiny little lady. I think she's a lawyer. She made a good statement. She goes, the Islamic Revolution was not a revolution. It wasn't so much an Islamic revolution as it was against a woman's opposition revolution. Because all of a sudden, a lot of rights that women had went the other way. So all of a sudden, women had to cover themselves. Before that, you didn't have to cover yourself.
I'm sitting here thinking about that now. Like, imagine being a woman then who could wear a mini skirt, and all of a sudden you got to cover yourself.
You got to cover yourself.
At what penalty?
At the penalty of, it became pretty.
I mean, you going to jail if you're out in the street uncovered?
It got dark. It got pretty dark. So they had like morality police who would go around. There's actually if people are into it, there's a great graphic novel this lady wrote. Her name is Marjan Satrapi. She is a French Iranian, and she's one of these like intellectuals, wears the turtleneck, smokes cigarettes. So she wrote a 2-part graphic novel that got turned into a graphic film. It's called Persepolis. And it's Persepolis 1, Persepolis 2. Because what happens is, I love whenever I read any books about history, or whenever you see a documentary about history, go, oh my God, I can't believe that happened and then that happened, right? So for example, just a quick side note, I was watching something recently, I forget what it was, some documentary, and it was talking about how Barack Obama, the day when gay marriage was legalized, was also the day when they had I think it was the funeral for, was it South Carolina where that guy went into the black church and shot people?
I think it was South
I think it was
Carolina.
around the same time when Barack goes up and he starts singing, and all these black church leaders stand up and they start singing with him. And whatever the documentary was talking about how he had to go do that. Then he comes back to the White House, and the White House lights are rainbow colors. And Michelle Obama says, I got the girls. And I was like, tell the Secret Service, screw you, we got to go. This is history. Because people, I don't know if you remember, people converged on the White House to celebrate. So she's like, I had to take the kids to watch that. And I go, oh my God, can you imagine within the same day, you got this, murder, mass murder, and then you got this beautiful, openness. Freedom.
Yeah.
So when you go back and look at a lot of this stuff, you go, wow, I can't believe this led to this. So here you have the Iranian Revolution. People flee. Like my father was successful under the Shah, but he wasn't part of he wasn't part of his administration or anything. So, but my father had enough money to flee, so he flees. And then the Ayatollah Khomeini, so Shah leaves in the early 70s, like January or something. February, Ayatollah Khomeini comes in. He becomes like, again, if you want to, historical figures, it's a cult of personality, right? So he's this religious leader that, a lot of the people that are religious who are poorer love and look up to. And so once he comes in, and he basically is like, well, we don't need all these like intellectuals and people. We don't need these people, like these people that were successful under the Shah. We don't let the doctors leave. Let them all get out of here. Not realizing like you're gonna need these people, right?
Yeah.
And then quickly it turns dark. You get the morality police. You get people getting executed. You get women's rights being pulled back. And right around that same time, Saddam Hussein's like, oh, there's turmoil in this country. Because they're on the Iraq and Iran are neighbors. So Saddam's like, let me take advantage of this and try and get some of this oil like region that he wanted, that had been in conflict for a while, that had been in dispute. I think he goes to get it, and then that leads to the Iran-Iraq war that then goes for another 7-8 years. And Khomeini, in his mind, I've read about this a little bit, where they say that he thought, okay, this revolution is going to spread around the region. Like, we're going to spread our revolution. And sorry to get really inside baseball with this, but the Iran is the main Shiite country, Shiite Islam. Saudi Arabia is the main Sunni Islam. So it's like Protestant and Catholic, right? But Iran's neighbor, Iraq, was majority Shiite, so they have the same kind of religion, but it was being run by a Sunni, Saddam Hussein. So I think Khomeini in his head is going, well, if these guys have a majority Shiite, we are the biggest Shiite country, it's our neighbor, we should spread our revolution should go here, and we should own this area. So he goes into war with Iraq, being confident. Of course, millions of young people die literally in this Iraq-Iran war. It got to the point where, first of all, America, going back to the U.S. and military.
But real quick, can I ask, all this is going on while you guys are on this break?
This is the first 2 weeks of it, but then like within the next year,
Christ.
no, the war didn't happen the first 2 weeks,
right?
So
but this is the unrest is starting and everything.
We come to America and we see, oh wow, this revolution is happening. Khomeini's there. Oh wow, and by the way, there's another thing that I haven't put in here yet, but it gets crazier. This is what happens. So late 70s, we come to America. 79, Khomeini comes. Shah leaves. Khomeini comes. Shah is persona non grata. Like the Iranians go, we want him, we want to execute him. Now that it's like, you know how they killed Saddam?
Mm-hmm.
The Iranians that took over the Islamic Republic, they were like, we want the Shah because we want to execute for all the crimes. We're going to put him up against, they were going to execute him. Well, the Shah was allies with Egyptian Anwar Sadat. He was allies with the U.S. And it turns out the Shah has cancer. So he's fled his country and he's got cancer. And then he goes, so a lot of countries go, we don't want you because your own countries like wants you there, and this could be trouble for us. Like they could cause some kind of problems. Well, first the Egyptian Anwar Sadat goes, hey, we're buddies, come stay here for a little while. He goes, stays there for a while. Then his cancer is getting worse. So Jimmy Carter at the time says, come stay here, New York, Sloan Kettering. I think it was at the Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute. Of course, that's when the Iranians go, well, we don't want trouble, but we want the Shah. You guys have the Shah. So you know what we're going to do? Some Iranian students go, we're going to go take Americans hostage from the American embassy. So the hostage crisis happens. So it goes revolution, hostage crisis, leads nicely into this war, Iran-Iraq war, where millions of people die, where America's selling arms both to the Iraqis and the Iranians. We were selling arms to both sides. So it just gets messier and messier. Millions of people die. Hostage crisis is probably the one that's closer to, in my mind, because when the hostage crisis happens, similar to everything we see in this country, anytime any country or anybody does anything like coronavirus, right? All of a sudden you got these knuckleheads going, China virus, you know, and like, hey, Kung flu. I mean, in this case, it's the president, but there's a lot of people do that.
I was going to say knuckleheads. Yeah. That was the president.
Yeah, but that's the thing. The problem is like these guys don't realize that there's going to be some asshole at a traffic light going to turn over and see some like South Korean guy has no idea what Korean, and even if the guy were Chinese, he didn't cause the goddamn coronavirus.
Right, yeah, they're going to yell at him.
This knucklehead's going to be, hey, you go back to your country, Kung flu, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So similarly, when the hostage crisis happens, people start picking on Iranians. And I've had other friends, like Ahmed would tell me, he's Egyptian. He's like, yeah, people used to call me fucking Iranian. So back then they would call you fucking Iranian. They would beat you up. I've heard
you'd be bullied here in New York? Really?
No. At this point, we've gone from New York to Marin County, Northern California. Okay. Great.
And you're how old now?
I'm like at this point, so probably like 7, 8. So it was like I think the hostage crisis happened end of '79. So I'm probably 7 or 8 years old.
And you're going now from New York City to what I'm thinking is a very white region.
Oh, definitely. Well, first of all, New York City for me, I'll tell you the interesting thing. Since I was 6 years old, we moved. When we came to New York, my father
came for 2 weeks and stayed,
but for a short time, because my father was a successful businessman, so he was staying at the Plaza Hotel in a suite. So it was my sister and I playing all day. My dad's doing his business. FAO Schwartz, biggest toy store in the world, is across the street. My mom's taking us shopping. I love the color orange because as a kid in Iran, because we were very westernized, like I had like Muhammad Ali dolls, I had Spider-Man, but one of my favorite colors was the color orange because we had, similar to the Fanta orange drink, we had a Canada Dry made an orange drink.
Oh, okay.
That was my thing. So I come to America, my mom takes me to Macy's, and by the way, going back and looking at it, that winter was one of the coldest winters in recent history in New York. So it's super cold. My mom takes me to Macy's and I get a Snoopy hat, glove, and scarf set that's orange. Okay. And I'm like this, and I'm sitting there as a kid. I'm like, this is fantastic. We go, you know, I get to go upstairs to the Plaza Hotel, get strawberry ice cream with whipped cream. The cartoons in Iran, like you might have had like a half an hour cartoons. Come to America already, even back then, you got hours and hours of cartoons
all day.
So like the revolution was working out for me. You know what I'm saying? It was working out.
So bad.
Yeah. So I do I do like we're there for about a month, and that's when my dad goes, well, let's find a house because we're living in a hotel. Let's find a house. So we started looking, but it's so cold. My mom says to my dad, listen, let's get out of here. This is too cold here. And now years later, when my mom and dad split up and divorced, my father would be like, your mom screwed me over because back then there was a building in Midtown. I was going to buy it. It's worth $150 million. I'm like, I don't know, Dad. I don't know what to tell you.
Right. What do you want me to tell you?
Yeah. You might have been a little drunk,
I had a
too.
Snoopy scar.
Yeah, I had a Snoopy scar. You're probably drunk, so you didn't know what you're doing. So my dad was, the best character to compare my dad to, and I've always wanted to do a movie based on him, is he was like Vito Corleone in Godfather. In that in his community, if you wanted something done, he'd take care of it. And he was very generous. And I always thought it was like stories I heard until when he passed away, I had friends of his who would come up and be like, hey, I got to tell you something, man. If it weren't for your dad, I never would have been able to leave the country. Like,
really?
Straight up. I've had 2 or 3 people straight up tell me their stories. One guy was like an admiral in the Navy. He escaped. He was living in Texas with his British wife, and my dad was like, sent him plane tickets in Texas. My dad was able to bring his money out, so he's like sending him plane tickets. Like, and the way my dad would do his business is because there's a lot of pride in our community, and so if I say to you, hey Ryan, let me buy this car for you, like you're supposed to be like, no, even if you're suffering, no. So the way my dad would do it, he'd be like, look, I'm sending you plane tickets. You have 2 options. You either get on it and come, and our friendship remains, or ignore it and then never call me again. You're out of my life. Like he would put that kind of pressure on these people. So the guy's like, your dad said, just get away, come out, stay with us. So the guy comes to stay with us when we're in Marin. And then this guy wrote a book about it. He tells a story. And he goes, one day my dad's like, come on, I got to go to the bank, do some business. So we go he goes, my dad takes his friend to the bank. And he goes, this is in like 1980 or something. He's like, he takes a check out for 10 grand. And he goes, he hands it to me. And he goes, take this. He goes, now, pay me back when you can, but just I know where you are, and I can afford this. And he makes him take it again, and the guy goes, that helped me like get my life back together over here. So my dad was doing that kind of stuff a lot. So sometimes to his detriment, by the way, he would buy anytime any friend had something they didn't need, my dad would buy it. So my dad would, like, one time he comes home with a Rolls Royce.
What?
Yeah, we're like, what's this? And he's like, oh, so-and-so couldn't afford it, so I just bought it off him. Yeah. I swear to God.
Who the fuck buys a secondhand Rolls Royce?
My dad, that's who. And I have no idea how that like transaction went down. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
dude.
I'm sure the guy was like,
What
look,
the
man.
fuck is this?
Yeah. So, and here's the funny thing is, because you would think that, oh, that must have been cool to be in a Rolls. I hated it. Like, I hated it because I was already like getting picked on for like being an oil-rich kid.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so the hostage crisis happens, and people start calling you fucking Iranian and all that stuff. And I have some friends that are getting beaten up more than others. And I've talked to people now, 30, 40 years later, who go, oh yeah, man, there was death threats, there was all kinds of stuff. Like, people were losing their minds, similar to what happened like after September 11th. Remember?
Yeah, of course.
They were shooting Indian Sikhs just because they had turbans.
Yes.
Right. So there was a guy in the 6th grade, and I really hope I get this. I remember this right, because I vaguely remember this guy. He would, these guys were kind of like bullies. I was in 4th grade, so they would call you fucking Iranian, and I was not a smart ass, So I think I either took it, or I just kind of like laughed it off or whatever. But I had a friend of mine who was this Iranian American kid who like was like Joe Pesci. He liked to fight. So this guy would get picked on and beaten up all the time. And I'd be like, dude, you gotta stop talking shit, But that was the era we were in. And looking back, I remember like the year before in the 3rd grade, I got in some kind of fight, a scuffle. Like, I haven't gotten too many fights in my life, but I got in a fight on a playground, and I remember like the bell rang and me and this guy were still fighting, and I could swear that must have started from, kids are gonna be like, oh, camel jockey or some shit like that, right? And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just there, and the things that got me through were, I was a good athlete, so like come kickball time, I could hold my own. And I used to also, I had a sweet tooth, and I'd go shopping with my mom, and she'd buy like a bag. She'd buy a cart of food that we need, and I had a cart of like just junk food. And then I'd go to school with one bag that had a sandwich, drink, and a snack, and another bag that had like Starburst and Milky Way.
Yeah.
I'd be handing that shit out. I'd be bribing my way into friendships, So those 2 things, plus I think I I think that's where I started to, because I watch a lot of cartoons, and I don't know how it was for you. We're about the same age. I'm 40 and I'm probably older than you. But in our era, our parents weren't like, let's go outside and play catch. Let's go for a hike. No.
They were working or doing whatever the fuck they could. Sit you down in front of the TV and watch this shit.
That was it. So I think that's kind of where I got my...
G.I. Joe, He-Man, Looney Tunes, Woody Woodpecker,
all that shit.
All of them.
I think I got my interest in comedy probably around then. And then I would start doing voices and shit. And now I'm in school trying to be funny. And I think all of that combined, comedy, bribery of candy, and athleticism led to me being able to just
deflect.
And get through that shit,
Let's take a quick break and tell you about our first sponsor, Liquid IV. Now, if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that 2020 was rough. Now it's time to clean the slate and start 2021 off on the right foot. One goal I have for myself this year is to stay hydrated. I'm doing that with the help of my favorite hydration product, Liquid IV. With one stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water, you get 2 to 3 times the amount of hydration as plain water. Liquid IV has incredible hydration flavors like watermelon, lemon, lime, and passion fruit, and they recently launched strawberry. Now imagine a freshly picked taste of ripe, juicy strawberries topped with decadent notes of whipped cream. It's amazing. All right, here's what I love about Liquid IV. I use them a couple times a day. I wake up in the morning, boom, glass of water, throw some Liquid IV in there. I love the tangerine one. That's my favorite so far, but they're all good. I know friends that are using them right now for hangovers. They feel great after that. There are days I go out for a walk, whatever, come back, boom, just have one. Stay hydrated. It makes you feel so much better. I don't get the headaches I was having. It contains 5 essential vitamins and more vitamin C than an orange, and as much potassium as a banana. It's healthier than sugary sports drinks. There's no artificial flavors or preservatives, and less sugar than an apple. It's made with clean ingredients, non-GMO, vegan, and free of gluten, dairy, and soy. It's the perfect balance to help you hydrate more quickly and effectively than water alone. And the company is donating 3.7 million servings in response to COVID-19. The products are being donated to hospitals, first responders, food banks, veterans, and active military. Liquid IV has donated over 6.7 million servings globally. Liquid IV is available nationwide at Costco, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code HoneyDew at checkout. That's 25% off of anything you order when you use the promo code HoneyDew at liquidiv.com. Get better hydration today at liquidiv.com, promo code HoneyDew. Our next sponsor is RAYCON. Now, every new year, all you hear is new year, new me. That usually means you'll be picking up better habits or trying new things. And if you do take up a new hobby, it's even better when you have amazing audio that will make the experience that much more enjoyable. That's why I recommend wireless earbuds for RAYCON. You've been hearing me talk about RAYCON for a while. I absolutely use them. I absolutely believe in them. So whether it's following along to directions in the kitchen or binging an audiobook while learning to knit or powering through a new workout with a pumped up playlist in your ear or checking out the HoneyDew just while you do your stuff around the house, a pair of RAYCONs can make any activity easier and a better time. RAYCON makes great sound accessible to everyone. Their wireless earbuds start at half the price of other premium audio brands. And guess what? If you think having white stems dangling out of your ears looks ridiculous, that's something you don't have to worry about with RAYCONs. They come in a range of stylish colorways, but always with a comfortable in-ear fit for a more discreet look. And they don't just look great. RAYCONs perform wherever you take them with up to 6 hours of playtime, water and sweat resistant construction, and Bluetooth that pairs quickly and seamlessly. You've heard me say all this before, so if you still don't have a pair of RAYCONs, I really got to wonder why. I bought at least 3 or 4 pair for Christmas this year, and everyone already loves them. They're not going to be using any other wireless earbuds. RAYCON's offering 15% off of all their products for my listeners, and here's what you got to do to get it. You go to buyraycon.com/honeydew. That's it. You'll get 15% off your entire RAYCON order, so feel free to grab a pair and a spare. That's 15% off at buyraycon.com/honeydew. buyraycon.com/honeydew. Our next sponsor is Ritual. Now, do you really know what's in your multivitamin? I don't. I look stuff up online. I ask people. I've heard sawdust, stuff that make yoga mats out of. I don't know. sugars, GMOs, synthetic fillers, artificial colorants, not to mention animal byproduct like sheep's wool and gelatin from hooves and hides. They're all ingredients you might find in a multivitamin. That sounds disgusting, but Ritual isn't your typical multivitamin. Ritual's clean, vegan-friendly formulas made with key nutrients in forms your body can actually use, all right? No shady extras. Like I'm telling you, I wanted to start taking a new multivitamin. I've been looking for new vitamins, and I read all this stuff that's garbage in where you buy them in the store. And when I got this offer, I was like, man, I'm telling you, I've been looking for something like this. I was really happy to get Ritual on board. It's a multivitamin reimagined, all right? It's formulated with key nutrients, including vitamin D3 to help fill gaps in the diet. Their fresh-tasting, delayed-release capsules are designed to dissolve later in less sensitive areas of the stomach, so you can take them with or without food. That's the other thing. I make my daughter take vitamins every day on a full stomach, because I told her, you take vitamins on an empty stomach, it'll put you in the hospital. Now available for women, men, and teens, Ritual vitamins are scientifically developed to help support different life stages. Ritual makes healthy habits easy. Your multivitamins are delivered to your door every month with free shipping always. You can start, snooze, or cancel your subscription at any time. And if you don't love Ritual within your first month, they'll refund your first order. You deserve to know what's in your multivitamin. That's why Ritual is offering my listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/honeydew to start your ritual today. That's ritual.com/honeydew. Now, let's get back to the Duke. So what sort of role was your grandfather playing in your life at this point? Is he in America?
So here's the thing with my dad. So my dad goes from New York. He's got a friend in Reno. So my dad, being the Vito Corleone type, he also liked to gamble a lot. We go to Reno because his friend's like, hey, I'm in Reno, come to Reno. My dad goes to Reno, and he's like, oh, we'll go stay at the MGM Grand. We get a suite there. And my dad, he's like a whale when it comes to gambling. So he's going at it. And every hotel we went to, I swear to God, Ryan, my mom would be like, yeah, your dad's thinking of buying this place. MGM Grand. He wanted to buy the MGM Grand. I swear to God. I'm not kidding, man. This is like real shit. My dad, everywhere we went, there was another hotel called Cal Neva Lodge on the border of California and Nevada in Lake Tahoe. He's flying on the plane with the owner. He's like, I think I'm going to buy it. He was like that guy. So when my dad's there, he's gambling so much they give us free suites, free everything. You go ahead and gamble your life away, just stay for free. Yeah. So then he calls a friend of his who's living in Marin. He goes, bring your family. I got rooms for you guys. So they all come out. Then that friend says, why don't you come to Marin and hang with us for a minute? So we end up in Marin. And that's where my dad's like, oh, I love it up here. So he gets a house near there, and that's where I grew up. And so my father was, again, being the kind of guy he was. So it was my dad, my mom at the time, me, my sister. We get my baby brother. My baby brother stayed in Iran and had to come out like a year later with our nanny. So they come out. Then my mom's pregnant. My youngest brother is born in 1979. And then my dad works on bringing relatives out, right? So he brings my mom's mother out first. Then years later, my mom's father, his name was Akbar, like, the AKBAR. There was an Akbar in Silver Lake. Yeah. So Akbar means great. So they say Allah Akbar means God is great.
Okay.
And my grandfather wasn't religious. My grandfather was, he was ahead of his time. He's our Mahatma Gandhi in my world. He was very much a humanitarian, very much an intellectual, and this dude was something else. So he owned a carpet business in Iran in the bazaars. So just to take you back to that revolution, and we've seen it here now, right? Like when you have protests, or you have none of us know if we're on the right side of history until history happens, and then we go, oh shit, I should never have.
Yeah,
right?
You're right about that. Yeah.
So you never know. You never know.
I mean, hopefully you get a chance to know.
Dude, give it 5-10 years and you'll see.
Right,
so
like,
my grandfather, when that revolution happened in Iran in the bazaar, so what had happened was, because the Shah had created so many enemies, even though he'd modernized the country, he had enemies that were the religious group that ended up taking over in the end, the Muslim, the mullahs. He had, let's say, the liberal, intellectuals who felt like we don't have our freedoms. He had all these different groups. Well, when the revolution happens, you can't just have two segments. You got to get almost the whole country's got to get to a point where they revolt. So My grandfather was part of what's called the bazaris. There's bazaars in Iran. Every city's got a bazaar. It's like a farmer's market on steroids.
Okay.
So my Akbar's stores were in the bazaars. And so when the bazaris stepped up, because that's a big part of the economy, when they stepped up and they said, during the protests that led to the fall of the Shah, they stepped up and said, we're going to close our stores in protest of some of the things that the Shah's been doing. That's when the revolution really started. Like, all of a sudden, you would have these protests. Originally, the protests were just like people that were against the Shah. Then it was like the bazaris. And it was bazaris, doctors, lawyers, professionals. Now you got millions of people. That's when the Shah was like, I'm done, I'm out. So my grandfather, when these protests happened, my grandfather supported the protesters. And the reason was because he was, idealistic in his mind. He goes, well, these young people are, they want a better life. Because what had happened was, under the Shah, similar to what we're going through right now, the rich were getting richer, the poor were not. And so these people that were taking over promised, well, we will distribute the wealth to everybody, which they never did. I mean, the mullahs are dirtier than anybody. Yeah. But my grandfather was saying, when he saw these young people protesting, he was out there being like, oh, here's some food or whatever, go get, good for you, But quickly, when he saw Khomeini comes in and he sees that this regime comes in and they start executing and they start taking away rights, my grandfather couldn't help himself. He was vocal. So he's like, I'm in the bazaar cussing out Khomeini. And my grandfather could cuss. Like, the cussing he would do, it was comical. He'd be like, what would he say? He'd be like, I wish a cow would have fucked Khomeini's mother in the ass. Or
and he's yelling this shit out.
That shit out. And so some pro Khomeini types. I mean, imagine if under the Trump administration, let's say it got more and more extreme, and let's say all of a sudden all the press had been silenced, and let's just say it got to that point, and let's say all of a sudden all the extreme right was suddenly on board and took over this country. Let's just say, and let's say it was religious based. Then imagine somebody in the middle of a town square going like, fuck Trump or whatever. Well, those people are going to come get him.
Oh, yeah, they
so
are.
My grandfather was yelling things in public, and some people were like, this dude's going to get it. So that's when my dad was like, we got to extract your mother's father. We got to get his ass out of there.
So they couldn't shut him up, so they moved his ass.
We moved his ass, man.
To another country.
Another country, man.
Another continent.
Living in exile. Yeah.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you bring your grandfather, or your dad brings your grandfather over. How old is he when he comes here?
My dad brings so here's the thing. So my grandfather passes away in 2003. And the truth is, given the fact that he was born in 1903, we think.
Whoa, he lived to 100.
He lived to 100.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so we think he was
he lived a lot longer than I thought he would. Yelling shit like that.
Oh yeah. No, he lived good. We think he was 98 or 100. We didn't have his birth certificate. So we'd be like, how old are you? He's like, I don't know, like 97? I'm not sure. I used to do a joke about that. I said every once in a while, every once in a while we just throw his like a candle on a cake during someone else's birthday. We'd be like, hey grandpa, you blow it out too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes we do it twice a year. It'd be like, I'm aging fast this year. Like I ended up at 2 birthdays in 1 year. So he was probably, so if he comes out in, let's say, oh God, I don't even remember when it was. Let's say it was like mid 80s. So we're talking like 20 years. So maybe he was in his like 80s or mid to late 70s, or low 80s. And he comes, he lives with us. And this dude, what was amazing about him was he had a work ethic, man. So he used to, the bazaar, having a rug store, is like you're constantly folding those rugs, putting them away, all that. This dude could not sit still. He was not at all one of these like old people who just sat on a chair and was like, give me my, drink. First of all, he didn't drink or smoke. Every once in a while, he'd be like, give me a ketila. He called tequila ketila. And he would wake up every morning, because he's from an era in Iran when like men used to dress up, again, like The Godfather. They would put on a fedora. They put on a suit, sometimes a 3-piece suit.
What's funny, even here, you go back to the black and white days. It's funny, you watch the sporting events from the 50s.
Yeah.
These people were in the stands in suits and
Yeah,
shit. They're
yeah.
flying in suits. Now we're flying in underwear and panties on our face and shit.
Yeah, I've been wearing the same pants for 9 months.
Yeah,
Kidding me?
I have not had jeans on since this started.
Dude,
I have not.
You throw COVID in with what the casual world we live in right now, and every time people be like, "Well, Steve Jobs used to go to work in jeans." I was like, "All right, well, I'm going to work in underwear."
Yeah.
So yeah, he comes out here and he can't sit still. So he just becomes like, he would wake up every morning at like 6 or 7 in the morning.
Does he live with you?
He was living with us.
Okay.
He was living with us. So so first of all, my mom at the time did not cook. So my grandfather would be cooking. He'd wake up every morning at like 6 or 7 in the morning, make us up breakfast, get into his suit and be like, all right, what am I doing today? And then every day he'd create his own agenda every day. He'd be like, okay, I think that these cupboards here need to all be cleaned, and he'd take the plates out, clean the plates, put them all back in. Then he'd be like, okay, today I'm gonna go shopping, and he didn't speak English.
That's what I wanted to ask. How did he take to being here? Did he enjoy it?
He was just.
But he got around without speaking English.
Yeah,
huh?
he was an amazing human being. So first we were in Marin with each other, and then I think he liked moving down to LA because Marin, it was suburbs, so he needed to have people drive him here and there. But in LA, especially in Westwood, LA has the biggest population of Iranians outside of Iran.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So whereas in LA, when I would run into, in Marin, if I ran into an Iranian, it was an event. I'd be like, are you
holy
Persian?
shit.
Yeah. Oh my God, who's your dad? Oh my God, hey. Down here, it's like, especially in Westwood, you'd run, hey, are you Iranian? The guy would be like, yeah, so's everybody. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. I swear to God, Westwood Boulevard.
Is that why that stretch of Wilshire with those beautiful condos and all? Is that an Iranian community?
Well, yeah, that's the
area?
The Wilshire corridor.
That corridor, yeah.
The Golden Mile there. There's some of those buildings are just mostly Persians.
Wow.
And there's a lot of Persian Jews that live there, as well as in Beverly Hills. And then there's a lot of Persian Muslims that live in
I knew some
Irvine.
celebrities had condos in there and stuff, but I always wondered what the hell everybody else did in that little corridor.
They brought their money from that country. Yeah. And they bought property. A lot of them bought property. Yeah. So my grandfather, I think what he liked about Westwood was he'd be able to walk into town, and there was a couple of stores he'd go hang out and like do his shopping, but he would also hang out and like sing for the guy and tell poetry. Back in the day, think about this, storytelling. Like back in the day, there's a Persian tradition. It was kind of like rap battles, but it was with poetry. And so you and I would sit, like, to entertain themselves, they would sit there and be like, he who goes farthest is not the thing. You'd be like, yeah, but he who did. And they'd go back and forth. So he had poems memorized, like, forever and ever. Their brains were working, man. So he would go, and he had songs that he knew, and he had like, poems. So he'd go to, like, some of these stores, Persian, like, grocery stores, and he'd just go buy his shit, and then he'd just hang out and talk to the store owner and be like, somebody would come in, the guy would ring him up, and then the conversation would keep going. So he'd be gone for hours. He loved it. But what was amazing about him though was, again, being kind of a humanitarian, like he would make friends just by doing, look, he's bored to death, right? So I remember one time when we were living in Marin, there was like some construction site about like a mile away. And my grandfather's like, come on, give me a ride. I got to do something. I'm like, what? He's like, next thing you know, he goes to the kitchen, picks up a pot and pan. He's been cooking. And he brings the stuff in the car down to the construction site. And the dude, some American guy's like, hey, your grandfather keeps bringing us lunch.
He was just making lunch?
Making lunch for these guys working. He's like, here you go, man.
Random construction workers.
They loved him. They knew him. Everybody knew him. He's like, oh, we love this guy.
Yeah.
He's like, what's up? And my guy's like, yes, thank you. He didn't speak any English. It's crazy.
Could you imagine? I can't imagine living in another country where I don't speak the language and just showing up at a construction site with like pizza and shit.
That's the thing. He just was like, let's do it. He's like, let's just do it.
That is great.
He would do that, like, and it's funny because my mom, he used to say my mom is stingy because my mom was a little not as generous as him. So one time, like when we were living in LA, and this is again whatever it was, late '90s at this point, he took some like blankets that we had at the house and he took them down the street. He'd seen a homeless person, so he went over and was like, here's some blankets. Then he told me, he's like, don't tell your mom, she's gonna get pissed off that I gave away the blankets. And I'm like, I mean, just like, do you, man? And that's the guy he was. And people knew him, and he was like, so he was very much like, he would teach us lessons, like things that I remember to this day. He would say, I remember, because again, he was not a lazy person at all. I mean, I'll tell you, Ryan, like for example, again, when we were in Tiburon in Marin, I don't know what happened, but one of my dad's friends gave my dad like a bunch of, he either gave it to him or it was a bunch of like big pieces of tree trunks. We had a fireplace. So he's like, hey, here's these tree trunks if you want to use it for your fireplace. So they're sitting there in the backyard. And my grandfather's like, all right, so what now? And I'm like, well, we got to get someone to cut this shit up. So he's like, get someone. He's like, you are the someone.
Yeah, you're
so
the
I'm like,
someone.
what are we going to do? He's like, well, we got to get it. We got to get a saw. I mean, so next thing I know, I'm at a place called Big Four Rents, renting a chainsaw. I've never worked a chainsaw. I'm 14, 15 years old. I'm a teenager. I don't want to be doing, I'd rather be like masturbating or something.
Yeah, for real.
He's like, let's go to this place. Let's get the rental and we'll do it. None of us knows how to do this, but we do it. So there I am with a chainsaw, just cutting wood. That's the kind of guy he was. Let's get it done. One time I got him in trouble because he goes in the backyard, all these leaves have fallen. He just, without telling us, he's over there. He would find things to do every day. Sweep, sweep, sweep. Next thing you know, we're all sitting at the house and we hear, we look outside, fire truck showed up. Like, what's going on? We look in the backyard. He started a fire.
He burned them.
He's trying to burn the leaves, not realizing you can't.
You can't set shit on
fire. He's like, back in the old country, you can do this shit. So that's the kind of guy he was, man. And he taught me, like, one time, like, he was like, sitting in the living room and he's like, hey, could you give me a glass of water? And I was like, sure. And I went off to do something else. A couple minutes later, he's like, where's that water? I was like, oh, I was doing something. I'll get it for you. He's like, listen, man. He's like, in life, if you say yes, just do it. He goes, because the person who asked for the water, they want that water. So he goes, you could either say yes or say no. But if you tell somebody yes, then do it right away and do it like get it done with pride. And I was like, damn. To this day, I use that on my kids sometimes. I'm like, if you guys just tell me no, then I'll go do it.
Isn't it crazy, that little moment? It's just a moment. That's a moment in time that just is etched in you, and it is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So he lives with you the entire time? He stays with you guys?
The entire time. So what happens is my family...
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but you get a good 20 years with him, roughly?
Yeah, we get a good 20 years. I mean, I remember, I was a kid when I was in Iran, but then when he lives with us...
But here, you got him in your house. You had that daily influence of that man.
Yeah, we probably had him for 15 to 20 years, if the numbers are right. And the fact is, he became, again, because my mom did not cook, and then my father... So in the early 90s, so my father, who'd come to America with all this money, loses it in bad real estate investments. He's buying shit all the time, so out of money.
Trying to buy the MGM and shit.
Yeah, exactly. So in the early 90s, the Iranian government realizes, oh, wow, we had a kind of a brain drain as well as a financial drain. A lot of people that could left. So they go, look, if you had properties in Iran and you left at the revolution, 10 years have gone by, no hard feelings, come back and do business, bring your money back here. So a lot of people started going back, my father included, went back to Iran to see if he could do something with his old real estate to try and spark some business. So he goes, so my grandfather kind of acts as the man of the house. At that point, I'm in college at UC Berkeley in Northern California. My two younger brothers are home with my mom. So grandpa's kind of like there to help and assist in any way that he can. But he's also living his life, and he's also this amazing influence on all of us. I mean, he was, like I said, he was like the Mahatma Gandhi, and he was funny, and he had a sense of humor. He would sit around, there's a Persian radio station that talks only politics, so he'd just be listening to that all day. And then again, once in a while, you'd just be sitting there, and he would get so worked up. You know how right now everybody gets worked up.
Yeah.
Like whether you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, whatever, you go, fuck that guy, fuck the list, whatever people use. He'd be sitting there sometimes listening, in his three-piece suit, and
in a suit, yeah.
In his suit, he's sitting there listening to this, and then I'd be like, whatever. I'd be, eating lunch and that, over on the little dining room table, and all of a sudden he'd be like, "May a cow fuck." He just go off. I'd be like, "What?" He'd be like, "This son of a." He's like going off just to himself. He was the most amazing dude, man. So yeah, so he was a big part of our lives, and he really, I think,
Would he come to like any events you guys had, any of your sporting
Dude,
events?
It was funny, man. He wasn't like if he was always game for whatever. So first of all,
he seemed active. That's why I asked. Like he does not seem like a dude that was sitting in the fucking house.
He did not. If you say, "Hey, we're going," he'd be like, "Let's go."
Yeah.
He would first of all, again, like he used to take. There was a Santa Monica farmers market. He used to take his 50 cents, get on the bus with his. He'd do shit, dude. He used to sew. This is actually a great. I'm sure these bags exist now, but we used to have, rice is a big part of the Persian diet. So you'd get rice in a big burlap sack. So you take that burlap sack and another burlap sack and you rip them apart, and then he would spend time sewing them together. Now you got one big burlap sack. Then he would get pillowcases that are old, sew those on it. Now you got a flowery burlap sack case, and he'd take that, get on that bus, 50 cents. The bus driver knew him. How you doing, Pops? Hey, get on that bus, go all the way to Santa Monica Market from Westwood. Get out.
Fill those things up.
Show up, and they knew him. So because my sister and I followed him around once to make a document. He'd show up. There's these guys, Mexican dudes that sell oranges. It was actually interesting because I go, they don't speak English. He doesn't speak English, but they know each other. Grandpa would show up, be like, I'm hello, and he'd give it to the guy, and the guy go, got it. They would hold his bag and take that, like, whatever it is, a 10-pound bag of oranges, put it in the bag, while Grandpa went shopping, get his other stuff, and then he'd come back to the same place, pay them, put everything in his bag, and take off. So this dude was doing that all the time. And
it's amazing to me because I feel like I think I've rode the bus in this city since I've been here maybe 2 times.
Yeah.
The metro 1 or 2 times. A
Never.
handful. Yeah.
Never.
And this is his daily thing. He's finding out schedules, timings. He knows where to go in another country. He doesn't speak the language.
Dude, other level. I mean,
it is other level.
If you didn't get inspired by that guy, I don't know.
And
what
that's
you
before internet and GPS phone. All the easy shit.
None of that. This is, he passed away in 200003. So you got to imagine exactly what you just said.
He just got to start using that stuff.
And he was game for whatever. So if you'd be like, hey, Grandpa, like, first of all, because we had cars, so if you wanted to go shopping somewhere else, hey, give me a ride. I need a ride to go get whatever. But I remember, like, I was in the movie Friday After Next. That came out in 2002, I think. Took him to the premiere. It was in Westwood. Had the whole family at the premiere. He didn't understand a single word. He just sat around. And at the end, he was like, that was good. I go, what'd you get out of it? He goes, I don't know, but we were laughing. So he was like, he sat through a 2-hour, hour-and-a-half movie, not understanding anything about it, but just seeing me on there and be like, I had a good time, So he was definitely wherever you wanted to go, whatever you wanted. My cousin from London, his name is Amir, who had a fun, almost like a bless you. He had a whatchamacallit relationship with him. It was they were kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like getting into trouble kind of relationship. So my cousin was single at the time, and he'd come visit from London, and he'd be like, he'd take him to strip clubs.
Come on,
we'll go to strip clubs. And my grandfather's funny because he'd go there and he'd be like, what's this? And my cousin would be like, it's a strip club. And then my grandfather would be like, oh, I don't know if it's nice for these young ladies. Like, he'd feel bad for them. And he'd be like, well, we should get out of here. And, but my cousin would make fun of him a little bit, like in a fun way. They'd have fun with it. So he was, he was something else. He was very much enlightened. There's a poem in Persian that talks about, like, surrounding yourself with good people. And it's more like, I always think of him whenever I think of that poem. It's like talks about, like, because there's a musk and a burgess. It's like, these are like the kind of muds that people used to put on themselves in these bathhouses. And it talks about, like, this, like, someone's at a bathhouse and they get a mud and they go, oh my God, this mud smells so good. And they ask the mud, he goes, are you this kind of mud? Are you this kind of mud or this kind of mud? And the mud goes, well, I'm just a regular old mud. Like, I didn't have any of these scents, but I had like a good influence. A flower sat with me for a day, and then I got this smell. So you compare your grandfather to that flower. You're like, that influence, helped me a lot to be who I am.
So how active was he in his in his 90s? Was he still getting out there and getting around and stuff? Really?
Yeah.
So he never really sort of was bedridden or anything like that?
Just the end of his life. So for me, what was interesting with him was, I always think to myself, God, if you could live a life like that. Again, he didn't drink, he didn't do drugs, he didn't smoke. Once in a while he'd have a drink, right? drank tea we drink tea all the time. He'd have like 3-4 glasses of tea a day. But other than that, was relatively healthy. Go for walks. Like to get out of the house.
Was he still there mentally and everything all the way into his 90s? Yeah.
The only thing he lost was his hearing sometimes. Like, you'd be like, hey, Grandpa. He's like, what? Like that. But and also his sight. But then he got, he got like cataract surgery or something. So he was fine. He'd read books. He'd take notes. Like, he had poems memorized. He knew history. He was just very inspirational. Like, stay active. Like, my father passed away at 76. And my father used to say, he's like, look, I'm in my 70s, but I've lived 700 years. Like, he went hard. My father used to drink. He used to do the drug. He used to party. Grandpa did not. Grandpa was able to live until, like, at some point in his 90s, we're all getting a little worried. He's getting older, but he's still fine. He's still active. So he was in his 90s, and I think he had like a gallstone or gallbladder or something, so he had to have an operation. And again, remarkably, he recovered fine. Recovered fine. He was ready to go. And so, but like a year or two after that, he had, we went to see a doctor, and they told us he had colon cancer. And we never told him that it was cancer. We just said, because mentally he was still going. So we said, hey, remember the gall thing you had?
I mean, that's what they say. If you live long enough, that's what they say takes you out in the end anyway, colon cancer.
Yeah.
Like, if you're fortunate enough to be that old, that's what's going to get you.
Yeah, so he had it, and then there was an experimental drug that he was taking, and we would say, that you're just taking it for that thing. And he was active until like the last maybe month of his life. And in getting because they give you literature from the people who come from the what's it called, the hospice care. Mm-hmm. They come with literature, and they go, here's some literature for you to read to be familiar with what's going on. And part of it is, they say, as the person goes towards like the dying starts, they lose interest in the things that they like to do. So if the person liked to walk up, so all of a sudden they're like, I don't want to go for a walk today, or whatever it is. So I started seeing that. So all of a sudden, whereas Grandpa might like nap for an hour a day, he was now napping 2 hours a day. Mm-hmm. Whereas Grandpa used to have breakfast in the dining room, he starts having breakfast inside a bedroom or something. And then his appetite starts going down. And that's when I start getting worried. And I used to take him to the doctor a lot. And so we go to the doctor, and we're like, because he'd been giving him this medicine, I think it was called Zolota. It was supposed to, kind of act like chemo, fight off the cancer. And then the doctor goes, hey, again, we never told Grandpa. He's like, I got bad news. He's like, this is now, terminal. And so that last couple of weeks, I remember.
Did you ever tell him?
No, we never told him that. We just let him, every day, like all of a sudden, he'd be sleeping more, he'd be eating less, and be like, oh, get some rest, don't worry about it. And I don't know if in his mind he knew, but I remember, like, when I got the call from the doctor saying this is terminal, I remember calling my aunt, who's about just 2 years older than me. My mom's youngest sister was born around the same time I was born, and so that was her father, and to her, he was like a god. To us, to all of us, he was a god.
Sure.
But I remember calling her and going like, just get some tequila and come over. This is bad news, And we all gathered around him, and he was in the living room on the ground. And there was actually a famous Persian singer. This guy's name is Maz Jobrani, and he is like got a great voice, and his music it's like with guitar, kind of acoustic guitar. Because Persian pop is like something else, but this guy plays like acoustic, really nice. Like, you don't even need to know what he's saying to enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And this guy had become a friend of the family through some friends, and he liked my grandfather because my grandfather used to sing this ancient Persian style, which is all vocal. And so whenever like any of these artists would come over, my grandfather would be like, "Let me bend your ears for a minute," and he would start singing for them. So this guy, Maz Jobrani, I'll never forget, like, when he heard the news, and some of these guys are so deep, when he heard the news, he just came over with like a tape recorder, and he like sat next to him, and he's like, "Hey, how are you? I'm here, like, let's sing a little bit." So he's got him singing like at the end of his life. I have no idea where that tape is right now, because I think it was too painful for me to listen to it again.
So were you there for his last breaths?
So this was like the hardest thing I had to deal with. So he was in a hospice bed in our house. We all gathered around him, and there was highs and lows. There was moments when, all the grandkids and all of us are around, and like he's laying down, and he's getting morphine at that point. Hospice care comes, so he's out of it, but it's taking time. So there was times when we had like little wigs. We put on the wigs, start dancing and like laughing, and then there was times where we'd be sitting around crying. At one point, that cousin of mine that I told you that was mischievous with my grandfather, he'd come from London, and I was like, I hadn't done stand-up, and I was like, okay, I got to go to the club, because I felt like, having watched guys like Richard Pryor and all these other guys talk about things that were heavy, I was like, I got to go and kind of get this off my mind. So I remember going to the club, in the original room, my cousin was in the back, and I was just talking about like, I've been home, my grandfather's like passing away, and like, trying to find some comedy in there to laugh. Maybe, I don't remember what I said. I might have been talking about the fact of like, it's taking longer than I thought, whatever it was. But that helped me a little bit cope with it. And then I remember part of it was like, all right, you wake up in the morning, you're sitting there, and then you stay as long as you can. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to try and conduct business as I go. And I was in the process of buying this car. So I remember going to this dealer, and I'm sitting there like you and I, and the dealer's right there, and we're talking, and my phone rings. And I answer the phone, and it's my aunt. She goes, he passed away. And I was like, shit. And I get in the car, I just rush home. And I wasn't there for his last breath. I don't really regret it, because I'm like,
you can't live your life that way.
Can't live your life that way. And also it's like,
you were there for all the important ones.
I was there, and it didn't. It was almost like too dark at times, And then of course at that point my mother and my older aunt were like losing their minds and crying and screaming and all that stuff. And it was actually interesting, because we live in one of those high rises on Wilshire, and people all knew him because he was always downstairs. He was always active. He was always there. So people are coming by to give their condolences, and this one lady comes by that evening, and we're trying to keep it like just family, but this lady comes by, and she was this older white lady who was a total alcoholic, like green face alcoholic. And she had become friends with Grandpa. She didn't speak English, she didn't speak Farsi. She didn't speak Farsi, he didn't speak English. But they'd become friends because she would always see him coming and going. So she comes in, she's like, I'm so sorry. I was like, yeah. And she's like, and we felt bad. We're like, well, you want to come in, come on in. She's like, hey, I'm not drinking. I'm okay. Then she saw like there's some wine. She's like, I'll have a wine. Of course, right?
Yeah, right.
And it was funny because I did a joke once about it because then
maybe
we ended
just
up,
one, maybe.
Just one, right? Then we ended up on the balcony, and she was like, yeah, he might be gone, but he's with us, right? She's like, you see that star? That's him. And it was funny because I kind of look at the star, and I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, that star's moving. I go, that's an airplane. and I was like,
your drunk ass out
of here, She's like, you might want to go to the airport and pick him up. He's gonna be landing soon.
This has been great, dude.
Yeah, man.
Well, thank you. That's a hell of a story to have an influence like that in your life. Fuck your life, in your house. You had that man in your home from different worlds and everything. I think that's awesome for you guys. And now you have those stories for your kids, those memories.
Yeah.
Man, to live to be 100 in today's world, I tell you.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
The one thing that I did learn also is like just be active. We hear it all the time.
Keep the machine moving.
Just keep moving. Even under COVID, I've had times when, because I'm not touring, I'm like, all right, well then I'll just do housework.
Or go for a walk. When's the last time you were able to actually get outside and go for walks and breathe some fresh air? The traffic's dead around here for a while. It's been, that's been at least fortunate. It could be worse. I know this is an awful weird time, but our air could be poisonous. Our water could be, you know what I mean? Like
you just got to keep moving.
It fucking sucks. Keep moving in life. Literally, keep moving ahead.
Moving. Yeah.
All right, so this is your first time on the show, so I want to ask you now, going back, what advice would you give to your 16-year-old self?
The advice I would give to the 16-year-old self is, again, coming from an immigrant background, my parents really kind of influenced me to not get into this comedy world earlier. I'd wanted to do acting and theater and all that stuff. I did in high school, and all the teachers would be like, you got what it takes, and they would my parents would come to a show, and the director would be like, your son's really good. And my dad, thank you. And then in the car, my dad would be like,
don't listen to those teachers.
Like, that bitch is crazy. That bitch is crazy.
Yeah, don't listen to these positive
You're going to be a
teachers.
lawyer or a doctor. Like, that's it. None of this. He goes, I swear to God. My dad took me for a walk one time. He was like, son, you'll never be successful in the entertainment industry. I go, why? He goes, because we're not Jewish. I'm like, Dad, really? I swear to God, I said that. He's like, be a lawyer. I was like, oh, like they're not Jewish lawyers?
Right, yeah.
Right. So and listen, I always try to go, I never have regrets, because those years when I went to Berkeley, I made some great friends. I got a chance to study abroad in Italy. The experience I had was something else. But I didn't get into stand-up until I was 26.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably could have started at like 17 or something.
Yeah.
So I go, you live once. And that's when I was 26 when I had my light bulb moment. You live one life. You can't live to impress your parents or for them, your girlfriend, anybody. You can't live for anybody else. If you have a passion that you really love, you got to do it.
That's it.
And don't wait on it either. I had a guy in his 60s. His name was Joe Ryan. When I was, in my mid-20s, I was working in an ad agency, and Joe gave me that advice because I told him I wanted to save up some money till I was like in my 30s to start trying to pursue this. And he's like, listen, he goes, I'm in my 60s now. And he goes, there was things I wanted to do in my 20s, never got around to it. But if you're going to do it, do it. And I was like, oh my God, light bulb moment.
I read this thing the other day that, going back to that, especially if you're older, the best time to invest or plant that tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
Yeah.
Because in 20 years, you're going to say the same shit. I should have done it when I was 20. I should have done it when I was 40. I should have done that shit when I was 6. Do it.
Do it.
Do it now. You're right.
That's it.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Ryan.
Please promote everything again. The podcast, your social
I'm
media,
at Maz
Netflix.
Jobrani. at Maz Jobrani across the board. MazJobrani. YouTube channel, subscribe. I drop an episode of Back to School with Maz Jobrani every week. iTunes, Spotify, etc. And then my Netflix special is called Immigrant. People can check that out. But yeah, follow me on the podcast. Hit me up if you've got suggestions, ideas. I'm always responding, so I'm there.
You're great, dude. Thanks you so
man.
much. As always, Ryan Sickler on all social media, ryansickler.com. We'll talk to you all next week.